Our Environment Northwest team is bringing you in-depth reports on our wildfire risk, smoke dangers, and what it takes to recover after the flames are out. We'll have stories all week from across Oregon and Washington, taking a look at what increases that fire risk and the solutions being worked on now. Tonight, Spokane meteorologist Jeremy Legoux explains why this wildfire season will likely be an active one for Washington, increasing the potential for smoke throughout the Northwest. After that, we'll hear from KGW's chief meteorologist Matt Zaffino with a closer look at the risk to Oregon. First, Jeremy.
We were driving up and over the mountain pass, and then on the side of the road were two logs still smoldering, to the point that when I pulled them out into the road, they started back on fire, completely unattended. Nobody in sight, and we haven't seen anyone in a very long time. This is how wildfires start.
We're seeing more human-caused wildfires.
After 8 years in the role as Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz knows wildfire risk, and this year has it.
We are predicting significant wildfire risk for the state of Washington as we head into the 2024 season.
Coming out of our El Niño winter, things are dry. The El Niño brought warmer temperatures and less moisture to the Northwest, and forecast models indicate that trend will likely continue through most of summer. La Niña conditions are emerging, but the cool, wet pattern likely won't arrive in the Northwest until fall. Drought conditions are present in the northern Rockies, Cascades, and even the Olympic Mountains. The drying out that started a year ago continued through winter with a much lower snowpack. Timber takes a long time to dry out and just as long to regain its moisture, meaning our forests will be more prone to wildfires this year. When timber burns, it creates the most smoke and air quality concerns, even though it's not what typically gives us the most acres burned in a year. That's grass, or fine fuels. An abundance of moisture in southern Idaho and eastern Oregon this year allowed those grasses and fine fuels the ability to thrive. While that might sound like a good thing initially, those fuels typically dry out quickly in the heat of summer and ignite easily and burn quickly. Here in the Northwest, our fire danger worsens throughout the heat of summer. This year, we not only have the fine fuels like grasses and vegetation drying out, but the drier forests to contend with as well. Hot, dry, windy conditions or critical fire weather days are becoming more common as our climate changes. An entire fire season can boil down to just one day, something we saw back in 2020 in Malden, or just last year in the Oregon Road or Gray fires. Now more than ever, it comes down to us. The El Niño pattern, responsible for warm, dry weather, also means fewer storms and less lightning, so almost all of the wildfires this year will be caused by people. For Environment Northwest, I'm meteorologist Jeremy Legoux.
Let's go over now to KGW Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino. Matt, what's the outlook look like for Oregon this year?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Let's set the stage, though, with the increase in the number of what we call fire weather days. Now, these are not the days where we have fires burning necessarily, but it's a combination where fire weather conditions are bad. So you need to have it hot, very dry, and very windy. And if we look at the Willamette Valley in Portland over the last 50 or so years, from 1973 to 2023, we've seen an increase in days that qualify as fire weather days by about 3, which is not too bad, right? But again, this is on the west side of the Cascades, where we tend to have a lot of marine air, tends to keep things down, and you don't have as many fire weather days, or you have that combination of all three: hot weather, very low humidity, and very windy conditions. Eastern Oregon, it's a different story. This is for south central Oregon, and over that same time period, they've seen an increase of 23 days. So now we have nearly a month more days where you have it very hot, very dry, and windy. So if there is a fire, or if a fire starts, it can spread dramatically and critically and dangerously with conditions like this. So that is sort of the background of where we are with climate change and the increase in the number of fire weather days. And that's the case throughout most of the western United States. Here in Oregon, you see the increases most pronounced east of the Cascades, but we have seen an increase in the Willamette Valley as well. So that's what we're facing in our changing climate, just days that are more conducive to wild burning and critical burning. So what about our snowpack? We had a good snowpack in Oregon, unlike Washington, the northern Rockies, where the El Niño winter created a very, very dry winter. We didn't suffer that in Oregon. Our snowpack this year was really quite good. It was average to above average for much of the state, and we don't really have much of a critical drought situation right now in Oregon either. That's all good because the longer the forest stays moist, the less the wildfire threat will be. That said, there's always a wildfire threat, and that threat is now a $1 billion threat. If you look at disasters through the course of the year, wildfire is the darkest red here, but from June really into November, it can go into the billions of dollars when we get a devastating wildfire like we've seen in recent years. So, bottom line, what's the forecast for this summer? Well, the forecast for the summer weather, temperatures hotter than normal, which is not good, of course. Now, what we want to avoid is that combination, like those graphics I showed you, where it's hot and it's windy and it's very, very low humidity all at once. Remember, that sets the stage for some of our worst fires, like back in September of 2020, coming off the long dry season, which is normal. We don't get a lot of rain in the Northwest in the summer, but then we had that raging east wind. Low humidity, very windy. We had existing fires on the ground, and they just blew up and created some of the worst fires we've seen in the Northwest. That's what you want to avoid, is when you get all of those things happening at the same time. So look at it this way for the 2024 wildfire season. Our summer is going to be warm and dry. It always is. With an El Nino season, we tend to be a little warmer and drier than normal, so we're facing that. We've got a good snowpack, so that's on the plus side of the ledger, right? But the fire seasons have been starting earlier, and they don't end until we get the fall rain, and that could be early September or it can be later into October. What we really want to avoid, Evan, is when we get, like we did in 2020, a big east wind event before we get the fall rains. That was unusual, and hopefully that doesn't happen again anytime soon.
Yeah, Matt, and you talked about the differences in location for those fire weather days, seeing that how many more have spread elsewhere. What does that look like when it comes to how fires then spread across the state of Oregon, where they begin and then how they move from that point forward?
And that is all dependent on the weather. It's a great question. So if you get a fire start, and whether it's human caused or lightning caused, if after that fire begins, you get a lot of wind and you get a lot of hot weather, and we know our summers are getting hotter with climate change, that's one of the reasons why our fires have become so much more severe, because the pump is just primed for them to spread more easily. Remember, fire loves it when it's hot, loves it when it's windy, and it will spread rapidly in those conditions. So on any specific fire, you can't really forecast that in advance. You got to wait and see what the conditions are around that fire. But we know that the antecedent, the precedent conditions are generally hotter, and that's why we're seeing an increase in wildfire, not only in the western United States, but western Canada already has fires burning right now. They've already been suffering through smoke back in the Midwest, because that's where the winds have taken that Canadian wildfire smoke. And we've seen that here in the Northwest too, wildfire smoke coming from as far away as Russia and the Arctic. So when you get to a specific fire and how it's going to travel, that's really dependent on the weather the day of and the weeks around that fire.
Got it. Well, thank you very much, Matt. A lot for us to keep track of, and a lot that we know our consumers and the people watching the news and keeping up with all this will be tracking this summer as well. Thanks. Well, the smoke from these wildfires is wiping out decades of progress on air quality in the Pacific Northwest. Coming up tomorrow, our Environment Northwest team explains the steps you can take to protect yourself from home and the smoke and the haze.